Sky News has seen a draft report of the World Health Organisation's findings into the origins of COVID-19. Let's talk to our Asia correspondent, Tom Cheshire, who's in Beijing for us this morning. Had a glimpse of this report, Tom. What's it saying?
It was a pretty long report, and it says pretty much what we've already heard. You remember the WHO team visited Wuhan, the original epicenter of COVID-19, back in January through the start of February, and they gave a press conference afterwards, and this echoes their findings. There's a little more detail on some of the difficulties the WHO have faced. They were in negotiation with the Chinese authorities since July last year to get a team on the ground, and then when they finally got to Wuhan, more than a year after the pandemic had begun, all their meetings were arranged because of Chinese public health regulations. But all of that aside, the main thing is we don't know where COVID-19 came from. They think the most likely source is that it came from a bat, was transmitted to an intermediate animal species, which is as yet identified, then made its way to humans. And they recommend trying to look for that intermediate animal source. What has been dismissed as extremely unlikely is the idea that this slipped out of a virus. There are several virus laboratories in Wuhan, and some had speculated perhaps COVID-19 came from one of them. They say this is still a possibility, but an extremely unlikely one. What does that mean going forward? Well, as far as China is concerned, they've done their bit. They have been open and transparent. At a press conference yesterday, Zhao Lijian, Foreign Ministry spokesperson, said he'll be calling on the US to open its borders, open its laboratories to the WHO. The US side saying they're going to go through the report very, very carefully. But the scientific side of this, as political as it was, is now it seems pretty much over. We're going to go back into the geopolitics of this at the same time as US-China relations and China with the rest of the world relations are the worst they have been for quite some time.
Which, I mean, people may have an element of concern about all of this in that you would think with something which is purely scientific, they would be able to get a definitive answer. The fact that they aren't ruling out the idea that this could be a manufactured virus is clearly going to leave the door open for conspiracy theorists and others who want to perpetuate that.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things with that. First of all, this is a scientific inquiry into a disease that spreads very, very easily. We know it spreads asymptomatically. That makes tracing it quite hard. When it comes to the laboratory idea, what they do actually rule out is the idea that it was manufactured or engineered and deliberately released. They say that is not a credible theory. The laboratory leak is something they looked at because accidents do happen, as they say in this report. But they still think, for a range of factors, really, the most being the difference between the viruses in that lab and what became COVID-19, it is really, really unlikely. But this is always going to be the case. Coming a year after the start of the pandemic, you want to be there as soon as you can on the ground. That's what scientists have been telling me when we've been looking at this story. It was a long time afterwards, and I think that sort of fog of confusion is going to be there a while. And you're right, that will be exploited by conspiracy theorists on either side of this debate.
OK, Tom, thank you. Now, I don't know what you did when you were a kid, but I was very lucky. I grew up in the Lake District, and when you're walking about on the fells and what have you, you do every now and then come across a fossil. And as a child particularly, it's really exciting.